Hi, everyone. This is an experiment, I think, to get to know people, maybe the unsung heroes of the internet or something like that. And the history behind this interview is really I work for a school, Kunskapsskolan, and we use Google Workspace for education. And I've been working a lot with Kim Nilsson in Sweden. And yeah, after a while, I realized that, a lot of the magic he was fixing was really because of this man who I've invited here, Ross. And yeah, so we're going to just try and see what we come up with here. We have a few things. I've let him know what questions I like to ask, and he had the time to think a little bit about it, and we'll see where we end up with all this. And yeah, so I'm in Sweden, in Norrköping, and you're in, where are you, Ross?
I'm in Oakland, California.
Right, and so we're 9 hours apart here. Okay. So it's soon 7 p.m. here, and I think at your place it should be like before even, what is it, like?
It's 9:45 a.m.
Yeah, right. So yeah. All right. Yeah, and sorry for the delay. All right, so let's get into it then. So your name is Ross
Scroggs.
And I'm always thinking, this is really childish, I know, but I'm thinking of Scrooge McDuck for some reason. is there so no, but is it but is it I'm thinking of the name. Do you have any roots to England?
It is Scroggs comes from, it's British, from Scroggy. People who lived in sort of these semi-marshland areas or something like that.
Cool.
But I don't know any of my relatives who lived in marshland areas. I just accept it and move on, right?
All right. So yeah, anyway, what Ross is doing mainly, or what he's helped us immensely with, is writing this great command tool called GAMADV-XTD3. A simple, long name, but we'll get into that, I think. And yeah, so you want to, but let's first go into, so what got you into computing in the first place, and what year was that?
Okay, well, I started my undergraduate degree in computer science in 1969 at North Carolina State University at the suggestion of a friend. I mean, I was in applied math, and he says, "Oh, you should try this computer stuff. It's really interesting." So, I mean, remember, this is 1969. And then at school, all programming was done in Fortran using punch cards. Okay, there weren't terminals. I mean, there was nothing like that. I mean, you went, and in undergraduates only got to use the computer at night. You went to the computer center, you punched in your cards, you turned them into the operator who run your job eventually, and eventually you get a printout back.
Yeah.
So I graduated in 1971 and then started a graduate degree in computer science at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. So now all of a sudden, oh, look, this is a PDP-10 time-sharing machine. There are terminals, no more punch cards, running at 1200 baud, 120 characters a second, and then eventually, 2400, 9600. So a completely different experience to me. I mean, using a terminal to interact with a computer, a time-sharing machine rather than a batch machine. Mostly there, the programming was done in a language called Bliss, which was developed at Carnegie Mellon, which you can actually look up on the World Wide Web, on the wiki pages, wherever the heck it is.
Yeah, we can link it there afterwards. Yeah.
Right. This was, sort of a predecessor to C. It had, it was a very nice language to program in. And so I wrote a program that allowed multiple users to have a chat session, basically, because Bliss allowed multiple people to run the same program to share a common memory. So you and your buddies would get on, you type a message and everyone else would see it, and they'd see a message and everyone else would do that. And then the editor I used was called TICO, which I think stands for Text Editor and Corrector, which is why I'm an Emacs user today. Okay, so VI, yeah, that was never my deal. So I stayed there for 2.5 years and then decided I didn't really want to pursue a PhD program. So I left and moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. And in early 1974, started working for a financial services firm that used Hewlett-Packard's 3000 computer, the HP 3000. This was Hewlett-Packard's business line of computers. And it had a programming language called SPL, for System Programming Language, which was nowhere near as rich as Bliss, but it was, a C-like language. And so all the programming I did there was in SPL. And so
and when in time is this around early 70s or
1970?
74, yeah, maybe you said that. Yes, thanks.
Right.
Yeah.
So here, part of the whole deal of this company is this company did what was called leverage leasing. And so this was a very rapid turnaround kind of process. So the financial guys would say, oh, can you do this feature? And we'd put something in, and then 2 weeks later, well, can you do that feature? So the whole thing was driven by the financial people wanting changes. There was no 5-year plan. There was a one-week plan kind of stuff. But it got me into this whole model of, being driven by sort of customer requests. So on the HP 3000, it was a time-sharing machine, but for instance, the editor was sort of this line-oriented kind of thing. And a friend of mine, Green, wrote a tool called QEdit, but both of them only had very simple line modifications. Space over, you could delete and insert, and that was it. So I wrote an extension called Alter, that stands for a linear text editing routine, which could be added on as an extension to either of these two editors to let you do very sophisticated line editing. So some point in the late 70s, I'm a little lost as to when this, I had left the financial services firm, worked for a couple of software firms that did HP 3000 consulting work, and then went off on my own with this Alter program. But then, I got, based on somebody, a fellow named Bob New that I'd met, I said, oh, maybe we can solve a problem. On the HP 3000, even though this was, you were on a terminal, there was no type ahead, like on the PDP-10s. You typed a command, you hit return, and you couldn't type until the command finished.
All right, yeah.
Another command, wait for return. And so with Bob New's help, we developed some hardware that would sit between your terminal and the HP 3000. This was a Z80-based microprocessing system with 2 serial ports. So you plugged into your terminal into one serial port, and you plug the other serial port into a port on the HP 3000. And so what the type ahead engine let you do is type ahead. So you type, and it would wait until the HP 3000 was ready, and then would send the next line. And it had soft keys and all sorts of fancy stuff. So we started selling that. But as people learned about that, then they sort of go, oh, okay, gee, I have this specialty device that I want to hook up to the HP 3000. But the 3000 had very, very simple serial communication capabilities. So we started expanding the concept to making more of these interface boxes that would help you hook up other devices to the HP 3000. So HP sold time clocks for use in industrial plants, but they had no way of hooking them up successfully to their own systems. So we built up something called the time clock engine, and you could build a cascade of these boxes. And so now all of a sudden, people could read in their time card and the data would come up and flow through our network devices into the HP 3000. And then we had specialty devices for hooking up fancy printers or other kind of stuff. Then, and so this is now, in the mid 80s. And then people said, oh, well, gee, and remember, this is all pre-internet by a long shot. People said, oh, well, we have a vendor where you can dial into their system with a modem and log on and run a program to get some information. So we built a thing called the network engine and the whole scripting language on the HP 3000 that would let you say, okay, network engine, dial this number, let me know when the modem is connected. Okay, send this string to log on, wait for this response to come back. And so the whole idea is you wrote a scripting language that was used to log on to other systems and collect data. So like General Motors was the people who were driving this mostly. So that became very popular because now this was a way that the HP 3000 could reach out and talk to other computers, collect data, update data, get data back, stuff like that. So then, starting in the early 90s, HP had a tool for monitoring network systems. So gee, this router go down, this happened, did whatever. But if something went wrong, they had no method for notifying anybody of this whole process, right? Someone would see a screen, they'd pick up the phone and they'd dial up, oh, Sebastian, this router is down, can you go fix it? So we started a product called TelAlert, which again, based on one of these interface boxes, was the back end to customer resource management things, these network monitoring tools and all sorts of stuff, that those tools could say, hey, something went wrong, send a message. And this was the days of pagers, right? So we could send pages, we could speak over loudspeakers, we could run display boards, we could send email and get responses back. And so and it was two ways. So you'd tell us to send a message, we'd send a page to a two-way pager saying, all right, technician, can you accept this problem? And they'd say yes or no. And if they said no, we'd say, all right, escalate, what's the next person? So that became our principal product used by large companies all over the world. And again, it was all driven by the customer. I mean, we didn't have any of these tools, but people would say, oh, can it do this? Can it do that? And so the whole process, once again, was customer driven. And that program was now, we stopped using SPL, we wrote it in C because it was now available on the HP 3000 and all sorts of various Linux systems. So all that goes on. But remember, free internet.
Yeah, but Linux, I guess you mean Unix then, or because Linux is
Unix systems. I mean,
yeah.
all sorts of. So
I thought it was too early for Linux at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
We had various. We had a Sun micro system workstation. We had an RS-6000. We had all these various Unix workstations that we developed on. But the tool performed the same on all of them. So that on and on and on. But now, as we get into 2000 and so on, now we're in the middle of the dot-com boom. And at that point, we were maybe 30 employees, give or take. And then some company from out of the blue came along and said, oh, gee, we can integrate what you're doing into what we're doing. And so in September of 2001, we actually sold the company. And I stuck around for a few months and then left because I wanted to make it clear that these people are now in charge. I'm not in charge. So at that point, my daughter was starting the 8th grade in elementary school. And her school was just getting into having computers other than in the business office, right? So in the summer of 2001, they bought 20 used, IBM PCs and started a computer lab. And so I started, volunteering at her school. And so the, and so time went on, time went on. Well, in 2002, she moved on to high school. So then I started volunteering at her high school, doing the same kind of stuff. And mostly this was, technical support, networking support kind of stuff. Because remember, even in 2002, this was pretty early in having computers all over your school.
Yeah,
right? So this, but it was certainly accelerated. So then, and so that went on for years. So at some point in the 2011 timeframe, give or take, her high school, so she had then graduated, but from high school and went off to college. So I kept volunteering at those schools. And then the high school rented space to another elementary school. So I started volunteering there. Okay. So now I'm doing these 3 schools. So then in 2012, all of those 3 schools put in an in-house Wi-Fi system. Before, everything up to then had been, you hardwired, if you wanted a computer, you hardwired it to the computer. And they used a system called Ruckus Wireless. And they all used the same vendor, but the vendor they used had been a customer of mine back in my software days.
Okay.
So he introduced me to a 4th school in Stockton, California, which is in the middle part of the state. And so I started volunteering there. So now I'm sort of volunteering at these 4 schools. Mostly I sat at one and did the other 3 schools remotely. And now, your next question was, what's the history of GAM Advanced? Well, all of those 4 schools switched to Google Apps for Education in 2013. Okay. So, and you very quickly discover, gee, managing this with an admin console is going to be sort of a drag. They're not very powerful tools.
Just let me, we're going to get back to this, but I'm thinking about where is, so really if I understand you right, you really kind of left the business world at 2001.
2001, right.
Yeah, and then you volunteered ever since, is that right?
Yes.
So you've been volunteering now for over 20 years.
Correct.
And your age is 73, I think. Is that right?
Yes. Right.
Yes.
Yes.
And when is your birthday?
July 5th.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, cool. So I mean, I think we'll get back to that maybe somehow, because I think it's really very interesting. But yeah, please go on with the GAM story here, and we'll see.
So the idea is that the schools, all started using Google Apps for Education. And so part of the work was migrating whatever existing mail system they had to Google. And we used an outside vendor in the UK for the bigger of the 3 schools, and the other stuff we just sort of did by hand. But you quickly discover, gee, adding users or printing this is like, ugh. So we looked around and discovered Jay's GAM tool. And we go, oh, well, this certainly makes things simpler. So we started using it. But even with our own requirements, we were sort of going, oh, gee, we'd like to make some modifications and do something. So remember, our software company sold stuff mostly to big companies. I mean, big companies expected a certain level of service and quality and whatnot like that. Yeah. If you look at GAM, Jay clearly did GAM, as a quick and dirty tool to help people solve problems, and that it did. But if you opened it up and looked at the code, you go, oh, this was not sort of the coding style that we were used to. So there wasn't much error checking, and there wasn't much consistency. What it did, but it was fragile isn't maybe the right word, but gee, if it didn't do what you wanted, oh gosh, something bad would happen. So I started saying, well, gee, I was a software developer for 20 plus years. Let me start to change this. Okay. And so, we made simple changes, and Jay was quite happy with that. But then we said, gee, Jay, you have all these environment variables. Why don't we make a configuration file like a Windows INI file? Oh, no, that sounds too complicated.
All right.
Okay. And then you'd find all these places where he had common code, and you say, well, why don't we make a subroutine and pass it these parameters? Yeah, but that's, but gee, I'm not sure about that. So it was clear his style of coding and my style were completely different.
Yeah.
And so it seemed simplest at that point to say, all right, just build on his efforts and fork off and make advancements. All right, so this would have been probably in 2014 or so, fairly quickly. And so at that point, I would make simple suggestions for Jay, and he would incorporate those. But for the more complicated stuff, then I just put it in advanced game. So, but back then, these were older versions of the APIs. And so I got to advanced GAM, and there was a version X and a version Y. So there's GAMADV-X and GAMADV-Y, but it's completely lost to me at the moment what the difference between X and Y was. So we'll forget about everything but X. All right, on we go, on we go, on we go. Well, somewhere in that whole time frame, Google introduced shared drives, which they called team drives at the time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
but this required lots of coding changes to support shared drives. So that's where the TD came from. So we went from GAMADV-X to GAMADV-XTD. Okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
This required a bunch of other stuff. Time passes. All right, now Python 3 comes out. Okay. And it was very hard to have a single source version that was compatible with Python 2 and 3. Lots of things changed in Python 3. So for a while, there were two versions of GAMADV-XTD, one XTD2 and XTD3. Okay, one, everything was written in Python 2, the other in Python 3. But this made maintaining things a nightmare, because everything you wanted to change, you had to change in two versions of the code. So then I said, all right, so much for Python 2. Okay. And partly also the 3 was the Drive API switch from Drive API v2 to Drive API v3. Okay, fine. They were sort of completely different. So at that point, the 3 version, I said, all right, talking to Steve Nelson, I said, all right, XTD3 is the only version there's going to be. Okay, everything else goes away. So I'm only supporting one version. So, but at that point, now, it's back to people who are using GAM sort of say, oh, like even Jay's version or something, oh, look, we want this fancy feature. And Jay was going, I'm not sure about that. So I put in the fancy feature. Okay. And so what I got back in this mode of things are customer driven. I mean, customers in this case aren't paying me anything. But the idea is they're going, oh, we want this feature. We want this feature. It would be real helpful if you had this feature. So I got back in the mode of users of my software would drive what it does, because the schools I'm supporting, the biggest school has maybe 700 users, and the next one maybe has 400 users, and one has 100 users. So we don't have any scale, but now people are going, oh, well, we have 500,000 users, and we'd like a command that does this. And you go, okay, well, clearly in the admin console, dealing with 500,000 users isn't going to work, right? So expand GAM, expand GAM, expand GAM. And then Google would introduce new features. And in all of this, I would continue to make direct contributions to Jay's things. But Jay, at this point, had started working for Google, and he would get advanced notices of something like, here's a whole new API. So Jay would implement a version of it in standard GAM, and then I would take his efforts and rewrite them into advanced GAM. So he was not directly contributing to me, but without his efforts, I was never going to get there. So advanced GAM is directly built on top of Jay's version, and then benefits greatly from some of the subsequent work that he did, where again, I would take his code and rewrite it in my style, and add additional error checking and whatnot, and more features to go on. So, I mean, as I say at the top of my page, without Jay's effort, this would be a completely different thing. So, and so that's how it continues to today. Is like last night, somebody wrote in the page saying, oh, I want to list all the users in my OU on a single line. So if you say GAM OU test print users, you get a user per row in the CSV file. But he wanted, oh no, I want one row with all the users. So I just put that in last night. Okay. Because it's not very much code and it solves somebody's problem. They say, oh, well, I could write a script and read the multi-line file and make one file, but oh, gee, and I go, okay, fine, spend an hour or so and fix it up. So again, very much advanced GAM is driven by customer requests.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, yeah, and I've experienced that firsthand. You've done a lot of stuff for me specifically, or us specifically, through Kim, and some of them crazy ideas maybe, but we have a lot of great use for it. Yeah.
And partly, in addition to the GAM program itself, there's a whole wiki or a whole GitHub library of scripts that people use, where you use GAM to produce some data, and then you use the scripts to manipulate the data to make it usable in some subsequent GAM step or some subsequent tool. So, all of those, are not part of the GAM program itself, but are part of the GAM environment. And lots of them can be used either by standard GAM or by advanced GAM. And some of them require sort of advanced GAM to do what they want.
So do you have any example where you've come up with something and Jay took after you? Because it sounds to me like he's giving you a lot, but I'm thinking you might have given him something too.
Well, it certainly is the case, where he proposes some new thing. I'll say, oh, well, we can clean it up by doing this, make it more standard, make it look like the other commands. Yes, there's some stuff, some bigger stuff, where a new API comes out, where I'll say, oh, look, if we make it work this way, more people are going to benefit from doing it. But on the big stuff, if I write something new in my style, so far I've resisted completely rewriting it in his style, to add it in. But as stuff comes along, an API changes or something like that, or, oh, gee, something just happened, I certainly will then make modifications and submit direct pull requests to him to say, oh, we can clean this up by making this change. But in general, at the moment, I can't think of a good example where I will write a complete section of code and add it to him as what's going on.
Well, I mean, it doesn't always have to be, I think, the code. It can just be the idea, right? So the idea.
That, and the scripting as well. People say, oh, I need this kind of stuff. And I say, oh, well, both Jay's version and mine can produce the data, but if we write this independent script that then manipulates the data, so you can use it in a subsequent GAM command.
Right, yeah.
then, that benefits everybody by doing that. The key thing to remember, if you go to Jay's GitHub page and look at how many people have liked his project, it's 3,000. If you go to my GitHub page and see how many people have liked Advanced GAM, it's 300. So there's an order of magnitude difference between how many people are sort of heavily invested in Jay's version and how many people are invested in my version.
Yeah, well, I can tell you from the little I know, I don't know much at all, but the little I know of marketing, I would say that your version or the name just of the whole thing probably scares a few people away. That's what I would think, to be honest.
But at least now they know the history. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that this is hopefully we will get some people to use GAMADV because I can tell you I don't know how the J version works. I never used that because Kim just told me straight off when we started that you should use this version. Okay, I said let's go with that.
The deal is, remember, there are 3,000 people who've said, "Oh, gee, we like this," and so that means there are a lot of people who use Jay's version, and it solves their problem.
Yeah, sure, and that's fine, but. Yeah, I mean, that's great. Obviously, it's great with that we have alternatives and things like that. It's just sometimes we may not know what's possible. Maybe we can automate things even more. I mean, I don't know how much, like, Rob, these filters you have, I don't know how, do you have that in the usual GAM?
Yeah,
or
no,
in
Jay,
the version?
Jay, I've extended it, but Jay started this stuff because on lots of the Google APIs, there's no filtering.
Right.
It's, you get all this data and you go, gee, I don't really want all that data.
Right. Yeah.
You can't tell the API that you don't want it. So several years ago, Jay started this whole output row filtering thing.
Wow.
His first way of expressing it was very hard to do from the command line because he was doing it with the JSON input. And so I developed an easier way to do it, and in fact directly contributed that to him. So there's an example of Jay sort of had the initial idea, which is going to make everybody's life simpler because you can now filter out. I mean, every time you print out permissions for a file, you get a picture of the user, a link to the picture of the user. And you go, who wants the picture of the user? But in terms of amount of data, it overwhelms the amount of data that everything else about the ACL. So that's the kind of thing where, Jay has an initial idea and then I sort of expand it. And so, I've expanded to input filtering. His original deal was output filtering, but now you've got a CSV file and you only want to process some of the rows. So the idea is you go, ooh, input filtering is not a whole lot different than output filtering. You're sort of saying, I only want to process the rows that have this value in a field. And again, there's a little discussion on the Google group over the last couple of days from Ian Crew at Berkeley, where all these universities are now having to pay for all this storage of people who graduated 15 years ago. Okay. And so they're going, oh, gee, we don't want to just throw all this stuff away. People might actually be using it. And so what Ian wanted to do is print a file list and only show files where, for a file you owned or that you didn't own, was it shared to you by somebody at Berkeley or not? But what he wants to do is say, I want to see if it's shared by any of these 120,000 users in this OU. We're going, gee, but, Kim Nilsson had asked for a feature a year or so ago where when we're doing the output row filtering, he says, I want to be able to say, I want this field to match any value in this file. So, I sit down and we go, okay, GAM OU suspended users print file list. or print users, and we produce a CSV file. And now in his output row filter, he can say, gee, I want to match any file where the owner is somebody in this list of 120,000 users. And bam, it just works. Okay. So, because the only other approach you would have possible is to output the data and then write a script that reads the data, and filters it all out. Well, you can do that, but with the output row filtering, where you could read a file of desired values, bam, we had it done in just a few minutes. So again, this is the kind of stuff where, again, customer user demand, drives what goes on. Because I think Kim's original impetus was the same kind of thing, where one of his schools, oh, gee, we want to match some output against these 1,000 email addresses to look for something.
Yeah, and I know because he did forward a lot of requests I had to use. So, and that's also one of the cool things here.
So that's one of the key things with advanced GAM is, Jay has a full-time job,
Yeah.
All I do is write GAM code, So it's much easier for me to sort of say, oh, sure, we can add that feature. I mean, I still volunteer at these schools. And so, gee, sometimes you have to go change somebody's toner cartridge, or figure out, gee, why is this switch not working? But a large amount of my time is spent just enhancing GAM. So and my advantage is partly I don't have another job. I mean, I volunteer at these other schools, but that doesn't require a huge amount of my time. So principally it's work on GAM. And again, in the schools, my schools drive very little of the requests. It's other GAM users because of scale. It's the other.
Yeah, I get that, but I guess you can use that then in your schools somehow.
Oh, maybe. For sure.
Yeah.
I don't have 120,000 suspended users, but
no, but still, yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, it's like, so yeah, but no, absolutely. At the various schools, one of my schools is very heavy into Google Classroom, and so all the provisioning of classes and teachers and students is all done with GAM. I mean, it may be a couple hundred courses, but you wouldn't want to do that by hand.
No, right, yeah.
Right. So even at the schools, we are GAM users because lots of it, the alternative is that, I mean, yesterday we had these 2 iPads that had Apple IDs that we didn't know anything about. So Apple says, oh, right, it's L ********* X at redwooddayschool.org. And we go, okay, fine. We quickly say, well, there are no users that start with L and end with X. How about aliases? Oh, right, there's an alias that starts with L and ends with X. Fine. Get that alias, assign it to one of us. Say you forgot your Apple ID, they give you the email to fix it, and on you go. So again, it's very, with GAM, it's very easy at that point to use GAM to help identify some users. So even though our scale isn't big, it's still a very convenient way to sort of get data.
Yeah.
So absolutely the schools use GAM, but they're not so much driving it as just users of some of the features that other people have driven to do.
Right, but I think this is the whole thing with our technology today. Like, I mean, sometimes if you ask the user, maybe we would use Windows 3.1 still,
Right.
So sometimes we need to just, we can do it this way, and they're going to be like, yeah, okay, cool. So I think it's really, it's a teamwork kind of thing, So what about Python? Is that what Jay writes in, or how did you?
So the original version of GAM, Jay's version, was written in Python, and so I didn't know anything about Python. So I
What
got
was the last language you used before Python?
probably C.
Yeah,
So again, C and Python aren't the same thing, but gee, they look a lot. I mean, at one of my schools, I taught myself FileMaker programming because they had this script that wasn't working right. And so I said, okay, look, it's just program. Okay, all right, you sort of fumble around. And so Python was the same way, where I had no experience in it, but it's a programming language.
yeah, right.
And so mostly you look at it and you sort of go, oh, so I learned Python by looking at code and saying, oh yeah, I want to do this. Oh, well, that sort of resembles what I want to do. And so you very sort of teach yourself the fundamentals of the language. And there's fairly good documentation on it. But again, and there are lots of examples to look at. I mean,
Right.
so the deal is, if you can read Python, you can teach yourself to write Python.
Right, I see.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right. So that's how I got going. I mean, so I didn't, GAMADV didn't start from nothing. I mean, it started from Jay's version. And then as you go along, when you have to switch from Python 2 to Python 3, you go, okay, fine. At this point, you start seeing where Python says, oh, well, the print statement now has to have parens around it. Fine, that's parens around it. Oh, well, this language construct changed this way. Or if you sort of go in Python 3, there are sort of more powerful ways of using dictionaries. And so a lot of it is simply saying, here's how I'm trying to solve the problem. Gee, it's like, when you do a GAM update group, some group, and you sync the members, you go, oh, gee, how do I get this? You go, oh, well, that's a set operation. Oh, that's set difference. Oh, look, Python has sets. Okay, so get the users you want to be in the group in one set, and the users who already are in the group in another set, do two set differences, and bam, you can synchronize the group. So a lot of it is simply, if you've been a programmer as long as I have, you sort of understand programming. It's the details of the language slow you down a little bit, but fine. It's just programming.
yeah.
What is the language you're trying to use support, and how can you use that to solve whatever problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
So otherwise, I mean, I didn't know Python from the hole in the ground.
Yeah, I get it. That's cool. But other programming languages, you mentioned Bliss, I think, and something else. But with all these languages, which one stood out from the other? Do you?
Oh, well, certainly, Bliss was, you should read the wiki page about it. It's very interesting. But I only used that when I was in graduate school. Then, when I was doing most of my stuff, it was HP's SPL language, which again is a C-like language, but there were basically no libraries, very minimal data structures. And so you spent a lot of time sort of writing code. Gee, why am I having to do this?
Right. I guess garbage collection was not something you had.
So what you discover that, once you, and then C is sort of the same thing. I mean, C was certainly a much more powerful tool. But what you get to Python is sort of the built-in power of the data structures, dictionaries and sets and lists and stuff like that, make it very easy to process data, because you now have built-in language features to help with that. Whereas if you wanted to do a dictionary in those other languages, you built one. Okay.
Yeah.
And then with Python, this very, very powerful library of stuff, which you use to extend the language, is, makes it, to me, I'm going, ugh, gee, where was Python all my life? You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So no, so yeah, no, it is for me, you know, if you want to solve a problem, then, you know, Python is a very powerful way of doing it, especially with all the libraries.
Mm.
So yeah, so there it's, you know, for anyone, to me, if you were sort of starting to say, oh, I want to learn some programming, you know, I think Python is a completely acceptable place. I mean, I've edited some Java programs before. And you go, okay, fine. It's a program. All right, what does it do? Look it up. Okay, oh, I can do that. Okay. But I haven't probably done that in a very, very long time. So yeah, no, you know, to me, it would seem if I were just starting out, wanting to learn about programming, I think Python would be a very good choice for most people because it's very easy to get started. And there are lots of resources, you know, books and online courses and whatnot, to do it.
Yeah. Well, so about that, I mean, you're 73 now, and maybe you live to be 140 if we're lucky, right?
Right.
No, but really, I mean, so you're looking for someone to help you along the way with the Python stuff, or
Well, yeah, I mean, when I had my software company, I had a partner, and he and I worked together all the time.
right?
So you know, Randy and I here, you do this, I'll do this, trade ideas and whatnot. You know, with GAM, in that sense, I don't work with anybody. But I talk to people and ask them questions. Oh, well, gee, what do you think if I do this? What if you think if I do that?
Right. Yeah.
You know, there are a very small handful of people who have made direct, very small contributions to GAM. Oh, here, what if you did this? What if you did that? Oh, here's your 5 lines of code that'll do it. But yeah, to me, it would seem to me, you know, given that maybe I won't live to be 103, at some point, you know, someone is going to have to sort of join in as a partner at some level to say, gee, if I decide to go do something else, I have no clue what else I would do, is to sort of help continue the thing going on. Or, gee, when you get to, you know, advanced GAM version 11.12.13, well, that's it. You know, if you want anything else, too bad. You know, but again, it's open source. People,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
people have forked it off and sort of done other things. You know, but yeah, that is one question, is sort of what's the going forward, how does the next generation take it over?
Yeah. Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
I haven't sort of figured that out.
No, but well, this might be a good opportunity. So you never know. And maybe I could learn Python. I actually did some basic back in the days, but
Oh no, I've done a little basic back in the day. I wrote a visual, I forget why I did it, but I wrote a visual basic program to do something. Right.
yeah, cool. All right. So yeah. So yeah, I think you answered most of the question, but yeah, the question about retirement then. So I mean, do you see yourself being? I don't. You don't look like a guy that's gonna spend the time on the beach with a drink in his hand, no?
No, absolutely not. Right. No, I have no clue. Is if all of a sudden this was taken away from me, I have no idea what I would spend my time doing.
All right, yeah. So
But
you're
this is what
really
I've been doing for, you know, 45 years,
right.
is being a programmer to solve problems. That's
But,
all
but
I
you
know.
but yeah, but you never feel like, oh, this is too much. I don't want to do something else. Never felt that, or
I don't know that every once in a while I get irritated at, gee, why did Google do that?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, I'll work around it. But no, at the moment, some days, you know, I spend a significant amount of my time helping people online. send me a Google Meet invitation, and you're dealing with people on a very broad spectrum.
Right.
Some people have never run a command line program in their life. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And
So
somebody today said, oh, what's the script for bulk updating user attributes? And I go, well, there isn't a script. You write a command line, you read a CSV file. So it's a very broad range of people that I help. People who they're not programmers. They're trying to solve some problem at their school or at their company.
right.
And
Yeah.
it's the right tool, but they don't, command line tools, you come from a different way of thinking than, oh, in the GUI, you just check this box, check this box.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yes. Here, gee, what exactly do you want to do? And you got to write a command to do exactly that. So that sometimes gets frustrating as to people who have spent zero time trying to solve the problem themselves just say, oh, just solve the problem for me. And I go, wait a minute, you should invest some effort into trying to solve the problem yourself, and I'll certainly help you along the way. And other people have spent considerable time. I mean, as I'm looking at my Google chat thing coming up, here's somebody I've worked with before going, oh, gee, I need a little tweaking, a little help sort of solving this command. Where people who at the other end have spent a lot of time trying to solve their problem, but need sort of the last little step to sort of get going. So on the days when people just want me to solve their problems directly, yes, it can get frustrating.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And on you go from there. But fine, that's the way it is. On you go from there. So most of the time, it is still enjoyable because my role is problem solver.
Yeah, right.
So to the degree that I continue to solve problems, then I continue to get satisfaction from solving problems.
Right. Yeah.
And so at the moment, if that opportunity went away, I'm going, I don't know what I'd do. I mean, maybe the only other activity I do is in just a couple of blocks from my house is the Oakland Morecambe Rose Garden. And so I am one of the big time weeders at the Rose Garden.
You make sure that there's no weed. Is that
right?
Yeah.
Right. So
you're really taking care of the garden.
Right. Well, parts of it. I mean, this is about 2,500 rose plants and on 7 or 8 acres, which someone convert to hectares. But there are the guy who's the head volunteer says, okay, can you come down and weed the east hillside or the west hillside or this area? And so that's sort of demand driven, but this requires no mental energy.
Right.
The official training is that's a weed, that's a rose. Pull out everything that isn't a rose.
Right.
And so that's the kind of stuff. When I do that, is you go down for 4.5 hours on your hands and knees or on your stomach, reaching under the things to pull out weeds, but it requires no real talent. There are other volunteers who know how to do what's called deadheading and trimming. And I go, that requires intelligence. I don't know anything. Okay. All I have to know is the difference between a weed and a rose. So yeah, that is my other activity, is weeding. Right.
Yeah, and I see some kind of a pattern here. You like to clean up code and have it nice and tidy, and you like the gardens to be nice and tidy.
Yes.
Maybe there is. So are you an orderly guy? You have your stuff like
right.
Rather that than having everything. Yeah. So it's yeah. I got that feeling.
Right. So if you come to visit Oakland, you should go to the Morecambe Rose Garden. Right.
Right. Yeah. We should all come and visit you. We who owe you so much for your time and your energy to fix our things and help us with all these things. It's really, I think it's admirable. And I mean, you could, yeah. So feel that you're
Yeah,
contributing a
but
great deal to many
I'll
people.
make it a point that when I get tired of this, I'll try to give everybody enough warning that someone else can join in to sort of take it over.
Yeah, yeah, please do that. And I mean, hopefully, maybe we can get someone joining you before that, and then you can maybe, do a more weed cleaning or weed fixing or
Right.
whatever it might be. Maybe you will be that, rose expert that will, you never
No,
know.
all
Okay,
weeding
then maybe you
requires
can.
is the ability to differentiate weeds and the ability to be on your hands and knees for 4 hours. Right.
Right, but what do you think about planning the garden? Like,
No, no,
finding patterns? No, that's not your
no,
style.
that's intellectual, right?
All right, yeah, but I like that. I think it's probably a great thing. I think for us who uses our head very much in the work we do, because obviously, programming all these problem-solving things take a lot of mental energy.
Right.
So I think it's a great thing that you found something that is the opposite. I think
Oh, absolutely.
you balance it out, and I think that's very that's a great idea.
Right. Right. Yeah. No mental energy required.
Yeah, and I think you said you usually bike to the schools you're at. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
I've
also
been,
good.
I, in the summer of 1972, I bought a bicycle and bicycled in the Rocky Mountains. And in the summer of 1973, I bicycled from Seattle to Washington, D.C., mostly through Canada. It was about a 4,100-mile trip. Some of it was on trains in a couple of places. So yeah, so I always bicycled to work, and at the schools where I volunteer at, I bicycle. I don't get out a lot for recreational bicycling. I should do that more. But no, I bought in 2001 when I retired, I bought a very, very nice custom bicycle. And every time I get on it, even today, I go, wow, this is a really nice bicycle. You know?
Yeah,
So, so yeah, yeah, but it is the case that I really ought to get out on it more than just commuting. Because here in the Bay Area, certainly in the East Bay, Oakland area, there are all sorts of nice bicycling areas that you can go. Some have more cars than others. But yeah, no, that is one other thing I keep thinking I should get back into more bicycling.
yeah, cool. So, yeah, and what about? I mean, like I asked you before, but I like to ask you again. Like, you don't want any money. I've gotten that much.
Right.
You got money, I guess. Then, or
Yeah.
or you're content. Yeah. So, but you told me once. I remember that we could always contribute to our community
Right. No,
in
when
different
people
ways.
ask me, if I called it all in, I would probably get 3,000 beers. Everyone says, oh, we'll buy you a beer. And I go, well, I don't drink alcohol, so the beers aren't going to do me much good.
Right.
And people say, well, what, we should send you something. I said, don't send me anything. I've only ever received two things once. Cam Newton sent me some Girl Scout cookies, which I accepted. And the people at Taylor at Sweetbriar, they sent me a T-shirt and a gift card. But no, when people say, how do we pay you back? Then my goal is pay it back in your community.
Yeah.
Um, and so, people, donate to your local food bank, donate to some organization in your community that you like, and don't do it in my name. I don't care about that. But it's the deal is, if you want to, help, support me by supporting your community.
Yeah.
Um,
It's pay.
because
Have you seen that movie, Pay It Forward? Or I think
well,
it's.
that's the term I use. I certainly, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
watch movies, but right, no, that's the whole deal. Is one, you could answer questions on the GAM group thing, help people out, and there's certainly people who do that. But if you just divorce it completely from sort of the computer world, contribute in your community somehow, because your community is going to benefit by you putting something back into it. So I don't need the money. I don't need the beers. I would take the Diet Cokes, but don't send any of those either. But yeah, no, it's and part of that comes from volunteering at the schools. Is there's always someone who can use your help, whether it's computer help or something else, either your time. It's like weeding at the rose garden. Gee, the city doesn't support it very well, so there's a whole crew of volunteers who work on it, but everybody in the city then benefits because it's a better place. And so to me, that's why I ask people to pay it forward. It doesn't have to be in a computer sense.
No, that thing's great. Great advice.
Make your community better by contributing something, your time, your money, your effort, whatever.
Right. Yeah, I love that advice. It's really it's love, right? It's giving. Helping out.
Right.
What about, if it's okay to ask about, I myself actually abstained from alcohol for the most part of my life. I tried out a few times, but it doesn't really give me that much. But what is your story there, if you want to tell it? Is it like, did you never thought that, that's nothing for me, or?
Well, certainly in college and whatnot, I consumed alcohol, and there were instances where, your judgment was impaired and you luckily got away from something. And so at some point, I just said, you give up control. If you consume alcohol and don't control it, you've given up control. And so I sort of go, fine, I'll avoid that. The other deal is people say, oh, if you don't drink beer, I'll buy you a coffee. I have consumed exactly one sip of coffee in my life.
Oh, cool.
And I'm so good. This is terrible.
So then what do you drink? Water, I would guess you'd have to drink, but do you like tea or?
No, milk and Diet Coke.
Milk and Diet Coke, cool.
Not together,
do you mix it together as well?
No, not at all.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I think you actually answered most things I wanted to ask you about right now. So do you have anything else you'd like to add to this conversation, or any ideas for what you come across top of your mind right now, or?
Not at the moment. There is one other YouTube video that I participated in some years ago, and at the school in Stockton, the lady I work with, her son stumbled across that YouTube video and told his mom, God, the guy who helps you out is famous. He's in a YouTube video. So now here's going to be the second video.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit more. We'll never know, right? But yeah. Well, great. And, thanks so much for your time and taking the time to answer my questions. And and for all the work you do, obviously. And I think so many people are, happy for the time you spend into it.
Yeah. It's, my life is help other people.
Right. Help others.
Help others.
Yeah, it's a great. I've been doing some 12-stepping, and you say trust God, clean house, and then the most important part, probably help others.
Yeah.
So when you're doing that, that's phenomenal.
Okay.
Yeah. So thanks so much, and we'll speak again sooner or later.
Okay, Sebastian.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.